Alrighty, with the formalities out of the way, how are we feeling? We're getting into the book, right? These red pages is getting thick now. I would love to know. I think last time when we all met, which was last Tuesday, because I wasn't at Saturday's session. If this was already brought up in Saturday's session, feel free to bring it up again. But I wanted to know sort of, is Audre's story heading in the way that we anticipated, right? Is she telling this story through prose in a way that's like, oh, linear? First she talked about when she was younger, now she's talking about when she's getting older, or do we find that she's going in and out of time, right? Like what are people seeing?
She's getting older.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel quite linear in the sense that she is only referencing her youth. At least right now, anyway, you know, she is not jumping back like to when she's an adult and then back to when she's young. She is staying like within the chronology of, you know, going to Catholic school, then high school, and all the different, you know, getting her period for the first time, the food. These are all kind of youthful things. And she's just staying there, so far.
Yes.
And that stands out to me. Oh, please.
No, what I was going to say is that very similar to what Ron is saying. Of course, I think that she's starting very basically because she is doing something like referring a lot to her family, especially her mother and her father.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that she has a strategy that she is using as an author. That's what I think. On page 14, and I did my homework, Paula.
Yes.
I saw that word caracal.
Thank you.
Caracal 3 times. And then in the last okay, the like it's not before the last paragraph, all of a sudden that word is curaçao, a Dutch possession on the other side of the Antilles.
Right.
But when I looked at Curaçao is actually like an island located in a country that was one time very dominated by like the British and the European settlers. So I found that very interesting.
Right.
That, wait, I'm seeing the word Caracal is being mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times almost. And on page, is everybody looking at page 14?
Yes.
So she's beginning this really with an expression of something. This is an island that had to be of servitude, and it was part of that colonialism. She's kind of starting over. I think there's a psychology going on in here, and that's my opinion about it. Okay.
Well, I would acknowledge, I love that. Thank you. I'm giving you gems all the way from over here. And I would acknowledge that there's also a footnote that sort of speaks to and aligns with sort of the understanding of that Dutch colonization in the British Isles. I don't know if we've read it. Years later, as partial requirement for a degree in library science, I did a detailed comparison of atlases, their merits and their particular strengths. I mean, we can continue to read on and see, but I think that line alone shows us the psychology behind why she would even switch the spelling of it, right, to a native spelling, quote unquote. Tasha, I saw you. I'm not trying to call you out. I just saw you mouthing the word. Talk to me.
No, I was gonna say I just started reading the book. Hey, everybody. So from what I understand, Karasu. I was saying it right before you. I was saying it right before you called me on the screen. Okay. Okay, let's just keep that very clear. And Curacao are 2 different spaces. Now, Curacao, I've actually traveled to Curacao, and that colonialism that you're speaking to, I don't want to mispronounce your name.
Argelia.
Argelia.
Angie.
Argelia,
Yeah.
is very real. Like I went there not even 10 years ago and they thought I was the help. You know, that area is a part of the ABC Islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. And it's like the Dutch Caribbean. So there is an elitism that exists on those lands that is like beyond words. So from my understanding, there are, because I do have a Grenadian friend, and the Carriacou is an island near Grenada, and Curacao is a separate island, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you, Tasha. I'm sending you gems.
Oh, by the way,
Sending you
you can
gems.
just call me Argie. Don't worry about my name. You could just say Argie. Yeah, and that makes it easier. So don't worry about, I don't get offended if someone mispronounced it. But thank you for pronouncing it though. But just say Argie to me. And thank you so much for what you're saying. That's very true indeed. And I find that to be the case. I've done a lot of travel. Many of these islands, believe it, are still under that colonialism mentality. And people forget a mental slavery is actually worse than a physical one. And colonialism is that. And we all, let's face it, there has not been a deprogramming of what that colonialism has done. So what you're saying is a very important point that you're bringing out. And that is amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
You know, there are even islands that we consider progressive that are really still steeped in that colonial past, like Jamaica or Trinidad or Barbados. You know, once you get to that, the people might be sort of free thinkers, but once you get to the government structures, it is still based in colonialism, you know? So there's something to keep in mind, just how deep that system is within the islands.
Puerto Rico is a colonial island also.
There are some systems in the islands, especially in the ones you've named, Ron, that they even still continue the powdered wig. And y'all know them wigs was not for us at all.
Look, it's happening right here. Look, and even like look at that. The Dominican culture has this thing about bad hair and good hair. And I know one thing from my own personal experience of, listen, I have a hairdresser. Yes, she's Dominican. You go in there, you're not going to have a curl left to your hair.
Yeah, I would name that as Black culture as well. You know, like Black culture has
but that's a form of how our minds have been transferred, make us think our hair is ugly, we're ugly because we're ethnic people, we're ugly women because our skin is too brown. You know, it penetrates very similar to what Ron was saying. So that's very true indeed.
Well, with the objective colonialism constantly happening aside, what else is standing out to us in Audre's story here? It shows her brilliance, right? And also particularly how much of a scholar she is too, and that in telling her life story, she can still sort of ground us in this realistic scope and perspective of how we as Black and brown bodies have to navigate this Western United States experience. So let's just name that as well. I'm being cheeky about, you know, the other part, but am I? I think I'm being real. What else is standing out?
I like the way she when she uses the word America all the time, she uses lowercase. And I think that's because, you know, payback's a bitch.
Let's talk more about the grammatical effect of that, Anna. That makes sense. What does it do to you as the reader when you see it in a lowercase?
I love it because, you know, going back to what we was talking about colonialism, Puerto Rico is under the siege of America. And so when I see something like this, I respect her for doing it because it's sending me a message. Thank you.
Thank you. What about other folks? What does it do for you as the reader when you see America lowercase? Does it resonate? Yeah, I see us nodding like, yes, great. Someone was saying something else as well.
Oh, I had just started to say, that actually still on the last thing we were talking about, is it Argelia? Is that how you would pronounce it? Argelia?
Well, she says Archie, but Argelia, yeah.
Yeah. And I was just, only today, I don't often look at the back of the book right away, but today I just happened to look at the back cover. And on the back cover at the very top, it says Zami, right? And it says Kariako name for women who work together as friends and lovers. So I just thought, oh, we're talking about this island and, you know, where her family is and, you know, her connection to it and her raising it, you know, and then it's like, of all things, the name of the book is a word. I didn't realize that before, is a word in that language for, you know, women who work together as friends and lovers. So that's all I wanted to add before.
I was wondering how you use that word in a sentence. Is a Zami like a group? Like would you use it as a collective noun, I guess? They, them, Zami?
So I was going to say a couple of things. So Paula, when you initially asked if she was writing in a linear way, again, I just started the book, and what came up for me was no, because I love the way she's constantly transitioning from her mother's and her aunt's experience to her own. I constantly feel I'm being transported very early on, and for me, that feels strategic to keep me connected, to this lineage. When she talks about her parents feeling lost, like when she mentions that her dad didn't want to hear the stories anymore because it saddened him when he was trying to make a new kingdom in this new place. But then also how there was a loss of like the knowledge of the fruits and stuff because they were in this new land. There was like no black elm or things like that. So when she, with this fluidity, goes back and forth between her moms, but for me, it helps to ground me in the heritage that feels very authentic as someone who is of Caribbean descent, of Haitian descent specifically. But what's interesting too is like when she talks about like Carriacou, which I did confirm is an island off of Grenada, and Curacao, and she talks about Bermuda. What I love is that she also brings in this Caribbean feel, right? Like not just specific to this one island, but these multiple spaces. It's like she's inviting this familiarity, even if you're not from the same island, right? Especially from my perspective, because my parents migrated to the States roughly around the same age. So that felt really good. And lastly, when talking about what Ron said about the word Zami, so Zami also exists in Creole, which means friend, right? So if you say that you're my Zami, that means there is a care and a love among in that relationship. So it's like, you're my friend. So to see how it then translates to another island, you know, again, it just speaks to this interconnectedness that exists among the diaspora that feels very rich and palpable.
Thank you so much. Gems your way again. Particularly because I think that then also answers whether it's plural or not. Friend, the term itself can exist in a plural way, even if it doesn't have plural spelling to it. So boom, we have the answer there. And yeah, naming for sure that now I'm hearing we're experiencing it in a linear way, but perhaps it's because Lorde is grounding us in sort of these like transportation little, like, you know, she transports us here with her mom and then she goes back to her grandma. Like maybe we're grounded because we are not doing anything as the reader, we're just there and she's sort of bringing it to us. That's kind of how I felt when you were sharing. So thank you so much, Tasha. Brilliance as usual. Glad to have you back. You basically also helped me do book club. Okay. What I also wanted to talk real quick about page. I hope I didn't go beyond the pages again, because last time I shared something and y'all were like, we didn't read that yet. Page 73, right? We read that, come on. And we read about her and her mom making food in the kitchen. I just love that whole part. And I'm wondering how folks feel about that, Lillian. I see that gorgeous smile. You had no pressure to share. I'm just naming that when I said that, you smiled. Like, she says, I took a head of garlic out from the garlic bottle in the ice box and breaking off 10 or 12 cloves from the head, I carefully peeled away the tissue lavender skin, slicing each stripped peg in half lengthwise. I've never even considered the idea of, you know how many times I've peeled garlic in my little Caribbean life? And I've never considered the idea of tissue, lavender, skin. That jumped on my bones when I read that. I had to go back and read that many times. And she does it earlier as well.
I love that she's speaking so poetically about South.
Period. South is
That-
poetic, right? Is what she's also naming
that
for
it's
us.
like this. I mean, I don't know if other cultures eat that souse and pig's feet, but that just feels so home to me, particularly pig's feet, which I kind of think is the same thing. And just to like put it in that context, you know, so lovingly, and this is kind of like what connects her, you know, to her mother and to her family, really. I just thought was like really like kind of a beautiful passage.
Absolutely, because there's a deep, deep tenderness in the words that she's using to express. And I think you're right, we're automatically felt as the reader to assume this must be also how she feels toward her family, you know? Especially when she talks about the what is it called? The pestle and the mortar, like putting the garlic inside. Ooh, right? That's amazing.
Yeah. And what it's made from. The pestle and what we call the pilon. And I was trying to figure out, oh, so it is, the decoration is of wooden fruits, right? I was getting a little lost with her description of it, but then, so what's it? It's made of a wood that you don't find in this country. Is that what she was saying?
I think so.
Can you, yeah, perhaps. You want to tell me exactly where though? So take me to the page if you could find it. No pressure. As soon as you find it, let me know.
And it's ornate. I think that was the reference to
Yeah.
the fruit.
Yeah.
That
Oh, I
on the
found it.
outside
Page
is a
74.
design.
Yeah. Page 74. Yeah, I wanted to read this out loud because it's beautiful. When she says, right after that first little, she's finishing the paragraph on the last page on 74. And she says at the top, after all the ingredients were in the bowl of the mortar, I fetched the pestle and placing it into the bowl, slowly rotated the shaft a few times, working it gently through all the ingredients to mix them. Only then would I lift the pestle, and with one hand firmly pressed around the carved side of the mortar, caressing the wooden fruit with my aromatic fingers, I thrust sharply downward, feeling the shifting salt and the hard little pellets of garlic right up through the shaft of the wooden pestle. Up, again, down, around, and up. So the rhythm began. And then she gets into this beautiful, beautiful music around the thud, push, rub, rotate, up, repeated over and over. The muted thump of the pestle on the bed of grinding spice as the salt and pepper absorb the slowly yielding juices of the garlic and celery leaves. And then she gives us the thud, push, rotate, thud, push, rub, rotate, up. She's giving us song as, you know, that is literally the joy. It starts from this descriptive sort of, I really enjoy doing this. And I remember this tenderness with my family to like, I am so invested in mashing this garlic that I'm in a song, I'm in joy. And she does it so effortlessly. And I think Ron is 100% right. That aromatic part about the fruit, it didn't even matter. She just wanted us to know every ornate detail of her joy. And I think this is what Audre does so well over and over and over again. Also, I didn't even get into this with y'all, but I'm a major Audre Lorde fan, as most people are, right? But like, I have a picture of her on my altar. Like when Ron told me this was the first book coming back to book club, I was like, let's go. Mostly because I love her music. I love her music. Is there anything else that we've read that maybe it came across to you as musical almost as we've been going through these chapters? It didn't have to be, you know, broken down in poetics. Maybe it's some of the prose, but did anything come off to you with sound?
Well, I thought also when they were making when she was cooking with her mom or on her own, I thought that was really nice. Yeah.
So
It's
it's
like bonding.
Is the sauce the mixture or the meat? I don't get it.
It's the dish.
Yeah,
Oh, it's the mixture with the meat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
it's
Almost
almost
like a
you-
gisao, like a stew, like a gisao.
it's almost like cold pig's feet, but you can make it out of different animals. But it's usually the pieces that aren't the most choice parts of an animal, which were left for the slaves, or not left for, but the slaves had to make do with what was left, and that kind of came out of that history. So yeah, I don't know if I can explain it. And I mean,
Pig's
I've had
feet.
it with chicken's feet.
It's like a pig's feet stew or pig stew.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a gisao.
But it's
I feel most
cold, it's not
Caribbean,
hot.
yeah, most
Oh,
Caribbean
it's
dishes have cold and
And it-
hot stews.
And
Yeah.
it's made more like ceviche.
Oh,
It's not,
Oh.
I don't think
It's
you
like
cook it
pickles
on
or
a
something?
fire.
ooh.
I could be wrong.
Ron, you gonna cook for us?
I've
I would say
had it a few
something-
times, and I've always felt like it wasn't cooked, like, on a
You eat
flame.
that. It's not cooked.
I thought that it was
How do
they
you
were
eat ceviche?
But that's like raw fish but that's pig.
I think they just let him marinate in the seasonings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
because
pickles.
most meat can also be salted and not cooked. I mean, not all meat is cooked in order to be consumed, especially what you're naming, Ron, and the Caribbean islands, right? Like that's normal.
That's new to me. Learn something new. Okay.
I just want to say that
I'm about to Google it. Please, Liliana.
that you can see the connection that she had with her mother when it came to like food. Like I think this is the closeness of relationship that she had with her mom, and it was through in the kitchen making and helping her make these dishes. And it was also interesting that she felt that kind of connection also with her father when she would watch him eat these food. When she would bring it to his office and just watch him eat it. So it was like very interesting to the extent of like her relationship with her both of her parents. And I think this paragraph, like this section here, was like her last time like she actually made food with her mom in that extent. So you can see the shift in her relationship with her mom after that, like starting high school. Like that was like pretty much her relationship there, which is sad. But it's not like I can still relate to this part because I feel that a lot of my relationship with my mom was also in the kitchen, like asking her, how do I make this? And asking her about like, when did you learn? Like, these were the moments that I felt connected more with my mom. So it's very interesting.
Thank you, Liliana. I think that point hits it right on the nail because she names this last moment of tenderness before we see her transition into her adolescent years. And so we're sort of meant to help that and keep that. And I too felt that way, thinking of my mother and my grandmother and the women in my life. And admiring just how Audre's biomythographical memory, meaning it's real to whatever extent she says it is, right? I just admire how she's able to get that on the page. So thank you for saying that because it really rings true. I want to name also that Tasha's putting things in the group chat. Make sure you look at that. And I just looked it up. It's boiled, of course. The meat is cooked. It's boiled in like delicious water with marinated with like acid and all these amazing things. And then it's served cold with other things. So it looks, honestly, I'm here for it. I eat everything though. Okay. Thank y'all for going on this food journey with me. Is there anything else?
Sounds really delicious.
I wanted to say in terms of the food thing, yes, I really connect to it. My mother was Puerto Rican, and so this thing with the pilon and growing up and as an adult, you know, the whole like sensuousness of, you know, it's very similar for Puerto Ricans. We use the pilon and the garlic and the salt and the pepper and the oregano, and some more traditional people, recao, and then we call it sofrito. And it's like such a like a part of Puerto Rican cooking. You know, it's like everything is seasoned. You make rice, you make it with this. You make meat, you season with this. The whole, you know, the way you tenderize meat, you like if you're going to make roast anything, you make this thing, you stuff the meat with it, and you leave it for 2 or 3 days, and then you come back, and it's really tender. It's really delicious. So I just wanted to say that, to me, also the connection is how, like in, you know, like to me, it's a connection with Africa. You know, like Puerto Rico, the other Caribbean islands, like what all of the, I think, I can't say this for sure that I know of, but it's kind of like in my gut, I feel like this has got to be like an African way of cooking that is everywhere and is kind of expressed in each of these cultures. So
thank you.
then I had another kind of tantalizing thing to offer.
Go for it. I love that. You know, I love when you take us there, Anais, please.
Well, I just was wondering if anybody else made the connection in this chapter, which I labeled mortar and pestle, but the sensuousness of this whole chapter, and like, why does she choose to talk about her menstruation, like her getting her period, and the very way that she goes on in this very chapter to connect the whole thing that you read, Paula, of the, you know, that motion, that down and then up, and then the sensuousness of that whole movement of what you do in a pilon, as she connects it with her menstruation and her own sensuality and sexuality. Because I think it's pretty wild, where, and actually I understood that the reason why she's at 15, it was the last time she ever made souse, is that, as she describes it in the chapter, once that when she is making it, after she's had her period, then she slows down and it becomes a very sensual and sexual activity. And she holds the pilon close to her stomach and is very close, very slow and very sensual. And she describes it in that way. And she talks about, here on page 77, this is after she's had her period, after she's had the conversation with her mother, and she says, I could feel the bands of tension sweeping across my body, back and forth like lunar winds across the moon's face. It's the bottom of 77. I felt the slight rubbing bulge of the cotton pad between my legs, and I smelled the delicate breadfruit smell rising up from the front of my print blouse. That was my own woman smell, warm, shameful, but secretly, utterly delicious. This is as she's doing the pilon. She's having these experiences. And then years afterward, when I was grown, whenever I thought about the way I smelled that day, I would have a fantasy of my mother, her hands wiped dry from the washing and her apron untied and laid neatly away, looking down upon me, lying on the couch, and then slowly, thoroughly, our touching and caressing each other's most secret places. So I was like very struck by that, you know, like that. I thought that's what she was giving us. That yes, it's food in the way we've been talking about it, but it was also a sensual experience for her. And then she goes on to say that then her mother corrects her, like, why are you going so slow? Why are you going so slow? And that she couldn't do the hard thump anymore. Like it was just, it wasn't what her body could handle. Like after she connected in that way, in that sensuous way of using the Prologue and doing the spices in that way. But anyway, I was wondering if other people had picked up on that or had, their own thoughts or reactions to that.
Powerful, yep.
All that. Barbara,
I thought,
yeah, go for it.
I thought when I read that part, Anais, my first feeling was, this is pretty disturbing. Why is she having sexual desires with her mom? Or, so that was the first thing. And then the other thing, when you had described her and the pull and push and whatever she was doing with the sauce, is that how you pronounce it? The sauce that she was making. I thought that was pretty orgasmic. I was just like, oh, okay, she's having an orgasm while cooking. I mean, that's pretty much what I thought. And then just the motions and the release and the stopping, and she wasn't able to proceed. I think that's kind of what I got out of that portion of it.
Gorgeous. What else?
I didn't get that part in advance, but as Anais was reading, it made me think about, I think even before the prologue, where she talks about how she wished she could be a woman and a man, and how she wanted to be able to feel the inner walls and describing how she wanted to feel penetration, but also enjoy what it feels like to be penetrated. I'm surmising at this point, but in you reading that passage, that's what I find to be even more beautiful, and how in some of the most mundane activities, we can find and discover things about ourselves. You know what I mean? It's like the body is giving us information. And for those who don't know, I've been doing some programming around uses of the erotic as power, which was an essay that Audre Lorde had written. And it's just like, how that passage was read, that's what she's tapping into, you know what I mean? And it wasn't that she was doing in the presence of her mother. Her body was responding to a thing, and she was organically listening to what her body was saying. And it just made me think about, as a sexual educator too, how sometimes we don't give ourselves permission to be exploring. It's not perverse, right? When it's like, oh, this is disturbing that you're doing this around your mom. I have thoughts around my mama. I'll be like, it ain't got nothing to do about you, mama. This just came up. I can't control that this moment has arisen for me. You know what I mean? But why? You know what I mean? Like, well, why does suppression have to be the immediate response, right? It came up for a reason, and it's helpful to interrogate what that is. So what I loved about the reading is that it added a sensuality and not a perversion to a natural body. We are orgasmic people. And when we don't step into that existence, we are distancing us from our innate selves. Right? And that can come up through any interaction of the senses. So when she talks about the ornate fruits of the pilon, of the mortar, I immediately could envision the wooden joints, right? Even so much so, beyond that, I was envisioning the wet spot that gets left after you crush the spices. I can see where the mark was, where I put in my efforts. You know what I mean? And that's sensual too. So thank you, Anais, for bringing that into the conversation, because it's really important in how we engage in the world anyway. And so I'm happy that she brought that up into space too.
Thank you, Tasha. I was gonna say thank you, Tasha. Thank you, Anais, because I want to name this is a recurring thing. We actually spoke about this somewhat in one of our first sessions together, digitally. When it came up, we see that Lorde does this to us time and time again, because she's still, in the telling of this story, a child. And it had come up during the first session that we had, like, why do we have to impose this sense of sexuality in this story of this child at this time, given that Black women and Black girls are constantly sexualized? And I think, again, Lorde took us to this place where if we don't acknowledge the sexuality that exists within us, right, as beings, as people, then we negate that. It's an erasure of who we are, and it makes it muddier and cloudier. Especially, I would like to think and argue that Audre would have, because of the use of the erotic in all of those essays, I'd like to argue that Audre would believe, because she's Black and she was a Black child, she had to have an understanding of her sexuality. And I think in her biomythographical, oh, I got it right? Maybe. In this biomythography, she tells the story in that way, not necessarily of an empowered sexual being, but of a being that is aware of their sexuality. And it's not this taboo thing, but it's something that's needed in order to name herself, as she gets into the book. Ron, I'm sorry, I know you were saying something. Oh, anyway.
That's all right. But also, to go back to Anais's point, traditionally in literature, we see the perspective of a young boy looking at his mother sexually. I guess they call that like kind of Oedipus complex. But here, Lorde is doing the same thing, but as a woman, which is kind of laying a foundation for her queer identity, that she is she's a woman looking at her mother in the same way that traditionally, in quotes, a young man or teenager or boy would have looked at his mom in that manner.
I wanted to say something because I'm always saying these kind of things. I think that, and I'm thinking about Pauli Murray, I think that if Audre Lorde was alive today and had started her life maybe 20 years later and then continued, I think she might even identify herself as non-binary, because she often talks about, like Tasha was saying, about as a man and as a woman. And so I wouldn't want to, I hear what you're saying, Ron, but I wouldn't want to peg her in this, that parallel you were drawing as a woman, a young girl looking at her mother, but as a sexual being who might have both of those senses of being a woman and a man in her body at the same time. And so I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
And the other thing I had been thinking before you said that, Ron, was that this thing that she describes with her mother, that thought that came to her and how she would, go back to that. I'm not even sure. See, I think for me, like Audre Lorde, there's not much of a separation between sensuality and sexuality. And so there's a lot of mention about what she wants from her mother, like touch, things that she doesn't get from her mother, much, the holding, the caring, the tenderness, that scene that we had talked about where she's up with her mother in the bed and the hot water bottle, and then she's touching her mother's breasts, or, like, is that sensual? Is that sexual? I'm not sure there is much like division there for her. So in this scene where she even says to see our private parts, I'm not even sure that's merely sexual, or a way of wanting something from her mother, like a certain level of intimacy that she was never afforded by her mother.
Right, because I think she says secret parts, right? I don't even know if she says private parts.
Secret places.
Secret places, yeah.
Right,
Which
and she might be saying her sexual places. She might be implying that, but to me, it's not just something sexual she would want with her mother, but more something sensuous and intimate and connected. Like to do that with her mother or any other person is a very intimate, sensuous experience and activity.
Which I am
So
no
I'm aware of that.
Right, and I'm no psychologist, but to your point, Anais, I think we all have that. I think all of us can name that whatever we lack or don't experience in our childhood, we then want, seek sexually, physically, emotionally, right? Like all spiritually, all of those things. That is a very human understanding. It's not that far-fetched to think that, because I think we all, if we were to privately examine our own wants and needs and what is sensual versus sexual for us in those ways, we can tie it back to voids and things that maybe we didn't get, you know?
Well, I think also that her mother is her hero. And she identifies with things that otherwise would not be appreciated in women. I'm also getting that, she is kind of identifying with things that women most of the time are just considered, well, that's what you should be doing, or that's what you're supposed to be doing. I wonder that there's a psychology going on in here. On page 55, I just want to read slightly. I was bursting, let me see, that would be the 1, 2, 3, 4th. On the 5th paragraph, I was bursting with pride that this important woman was my mother. She was the only mother in my class who watched for airplanes. Now, as we get to the other paragraph, I was very proud of her. But sometimes, just sometimes, I wish she would be like all the other mothers, one waiting for me at home with milk and home-baked cookies and a frilly apron, like the blonde smiling mother in Dick and Jane. So this is amazing because she is doing a contrast comparison at the same time and still manages to explain why is she so proud of her mother. See what I'm saying? Her mother was like the businesswoman, took care of this, took care of that. Obviously, it is not going to have time like that. Those commercials we see, what the mother is supposed to be the person with the apron on, who's at home baking cookies. But come on, people, we know that ethnic women in this country have most of the time had to always go to work. And you were not that typical woman with having warm cookies waiting for your children. So I think in understanding this, she is making a direct contrast comparison. Her mother is her hero. And like you said, when we go into she dares to talk about private parts, she dares to, the way I see that, there's like symbolism going on in here that, guess what? This is a part of us. Mm-hmm. This is a part of my body as a woman. And without these parts, I wouldn't be who I am. That's the message I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
How do we feel about when Audre comes home after losing the election? Her mother beats her for going against what she, the mother, told Audre, not to waste your time with such frivolous things. And I felt for numerous reasons, but the mother does beat her. Beating, spankings were not uncommon back then, but it even felt a little jarring to me on possibly on Audre's mental health or well-being. I'm not diagnosing her, but for her mother to react that way to something that Audre was so adamant about and so happy to be a part of.
But she kind of knew that was her mother's reaction.
Yeah.
Not maybe as drastic as you.
Yeah, but the drasticness I'm talking about.
I believe in positive parenting. The more you can do nice for a child, the better it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
They good things and loving things and caring things, and it's so important while raising children.
Yeah.
That's true, but
I mean, the mother was always stern, but
yeah,
there may have been acts of, well, I'm going to call acts of violence in quotes, but this just seemed to like really stand out because Audrey's hopes were so high that, you know, she was going to win. And Audrey at this age is still grappling with societal racism, not just systemic, but even within the classroom, you know, even within like little kids.
Right. But we know that Audrey's mom, like our last session, we've noted, doesn't always advocate for her in those particular settings, right? And this is something she is left to navigate on her own constantly. And I think she knew to some extent that her mother was going to be upset. That's true. And I think we're getting that sort of shock that she writes as the reader is in it, where she's trying to put us where she is. But I don't know if it's not I don't know if it's so out of character for the mom to behave in that way. Like, I think that she's sort of setting us up in this way that her mother, also, I think, you know, Audrey talks about her always being seen as a rebellious child.
yeah.
And it's the Caribbean mentality, perhaps, of like, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. You didn't study hard enough. You know, this will teach you to study hard enough. Maybe next time you'll win.
I think the mother knows a lot. She protects her a lot. She's protecting her from all the racism that's happening around her. And her mother told her not to do it. And that was the final thing. Don't do it, because
don't do it.
You know, and I think the mother was hurting too. And the only way the mother could express herself was to hit her. You know, I mean, I was brought up being hit too. And to this day, I say, I thank my mother. Otherwise, I wouldn't be the person that I am. So it's like.
Well, the interesting thing about that is in chapter 3.
RG, I think Tasha she just started speaking. Yeah.
No worries. It'll be short. So what I'm hearing here is there's a couple of things, right? So it sounds like the mom was in a way replicating societal norms, right? So when you first said how she corrected Audrey with the pilon, when she noticed that she was doing it a little bit slower, it's like, no, this is the right way to do it. This way, right? For me, that can be an extension of the programming where her mother may have been programmed to do something a certain way and not be in touch with her sensuals, and now is fixing that onto the children, which we all know, like we have to act a certain way in public, we have to be a certain way. So this could be an example of that. And that only gets followed up with this example that y'all giving right now, as far as like, and I don't blame my mama and I don't blame my parents, but sometimes protecting someone is not advantageous, right? You know, protecting me from racism doesn't really protect me from racism, right? You know, it's a false sense of safety. In the interim of you protecting me, you creating harm, you know? So it's just like, it perpetuates avoidance as the main way to survive, right? I told you not to do this thing because of the racism, whatever. Again, I don't know the full context of the passage, but I told you not to do this thing so that you wouldn't be harmed. As a result of you being hurt, I'm not going to hold you in a particular way. I'm going to punish you for being courageous and stepping into your stuff. So it's another form of suppression that we see with the food now being replicated in another space.
And I agree with you, Tasha. That's a good observation. In chapter 8, it opens up with that main phrase, in my mother's house, there was no room in which to make errors, no room to be wrong. Okay, but of course, what caught my attention the most is her Catholic school experience. Okay, in the next page, look at page 59, everybody. Turn to, I was the first Black student in St. Catherine's School. I'm reading like towards, that would be like the the fifth paragraph there. I was the first Black student in St. Catherine's School, and all the white kids in my 6th grade class knew about the landlord who had hanged himself in the basement because of me and my family. Now that had to be cruel. And she goes on to the last paragraph. At St. Catherine's School, the Sisters of Charity were downright hostile. Their racism was unadorned, unexcused, and particularly painful. Because I was unprepared for it, I got no help at home. Now, realize the Sisters of Charity is that order that was founded by Elizabeth Ann Seton. They were the ones with the, have you ever seen a picture of the sisters with those hats on? And the majority of them were of Irish, European background, and they were indeed considered to be very cruel to their students. Okay, if you ever get a chance to watch that movie Doubt, go ahead and watch it. Okay, some of you might have seen that. This reminded me of that. And what happens to that first Black child in the school? Well, those Sisters of Charity were something else, and they were not very educated. Well, again, we're talking about the whole Catholic Church system, and that Catholic school system once again is being brought up. Remember when we had just done Sonia Sotomayor, and she talked about some of her experiences. But what I want to bring up, especially in the Caribbean, part of their culture, I don't know of any Caribbean child or Caribbean parents that never got beat by their parents. Okay, it seems to be almost part of the culture. And when you have certain Caribbean cultures like Jamaican, and even where she's from, when they beat their children, they don't stop until blood comes out, because they believe they have to get the bad blood out. So it's important to look at what has become an actual part of that culture. Yeah. And I think she's talking about that.
But what about her sisters who did all this before she did? There's no like, and they were Black, right?
But Audre is Blackest. And if we just even move to pay, you know, she talks
about
that color.
But even if you're a light-skinned Black, you didn't get away with it.
But she's naming that for her, it's not about even if you're light-skinned Black, right? In her Black experience and her Black body, it's not even about her sisters. Whatever her sisters, whatever pain or sort of thing they went through is not comparable to what she's going through, because it's her experience in her Black body. And I want to take us to page 58, where she says, I grew up Black as my need for life, for affirmation, for love, for sharing, copying from my mother what was in her, unfulfilled. I grew up Black as Sebulisa, who I was to find in the cool mud hall of Abmi several lifetimes later, and as alone. Then she talks about my mother's words teaching me all manner of wily and diversionary defenses learned from the white man's tongue, from out of the mouth of her father. She had to use these defenses and had survived by them, and also died by them a little. At the same time, all the colors change and become each other, merge and separate, flow into rainbows and nooses. Okay, she's letting us know that even in her mother, right? That's a wowie right there. Even in her mother's identity, right? Whatever sort of tactics that her mother had to adapt to in order to survive, Audra's was 10 times that. That's what she's telling us. And her mother should we go on where her sister Phyllis and her, they're chilling one day, right, in 2nd grade, and she's listening to her mother talk about someone being colored at the school. And Audrey's like, well, what's colored? What's colored? And they're like, yo, the nuns, I'm paraphrasing, but they're like, yo, the nuns are colored, right? The fathers are colored. I mean, the nuns are white, the fathers are white. And she goes, what does colored mean? I asked to my amazement. Neither one of my sisters were quite sure. Well, Phyllis said, the nuns are white and the short next door man is white and Father Movoy is white and we're colored. And what's mommy? Is she white or colored? I don't know, answered Phyllis impatiently. Well, I said, if anybody asks me what I am, I'm gonna tell them I'm white, same as mommy. Oh, girl, you better not do that, they chorused in horror. And the story continues from there. But we have to understand that the experiences of her sisters can only be a relation to her. It can never speak, aid, or help support her. Audre from the beginning was known as the darkest child, the most difficult child, right? And also navigating a queer identity. Her sisters weren't navigating that in school, you know? So I want to name that we just can't transpose the idea that just because this person is Black or someone else is Black, then they can be in community with that. Oftentimes, Audre seems that she's alone. And I think that's why we come back to the story of her name.
1940s too.
Period. Oh, y'all have made this a very juicy night. I just want to
It
take
is
a moment.
juicy. No, Audre
Right.
made it juicy.
No, Audre gave us the foundation, but it is us as the community. We make it
Yeah, juicy.
It's us, for sure. I don't even know Audre would approve of my term juicy, but I know that it's there. I want to take a second real quick before we forget, because I often do, to shout out that free and open to the public, coming very, very soon in T-minus a month and 6 days, or minus the 6 days, sorry. Free and open to the public is the Mosaic Literary Conference, this year's theme being queer. It's Saturday, November 20th, 2021, and it is a virtual conference, meaning you can attend for the whole thing, you can attend for portions, but if you want to know more about it, definitely visit us at mosaiclitcon.com, right? And Ron put that link in the chat. If you have social media, feel free to share it. We're trying to get folks to come. If you don't have social media, but you have friends that you know would love to join, please, please, please. And you could actually go to that website for references as to an agenda for the day. I don't know if you want to add anything else about the queer conference, Ron. Anything else you want to say? Nope.
I'm going to add the lineup shortly.
How do
Lineup
you,
shortly, and Liliana already registered, so woo woo.
I have a
Thank
tech
you, Liliana.
question. How do
Yes.
you, when you put all this information in the chat, right? And once you close this window, how do you keep that information? How do I get back to it?
So that is not possible.
Yeah, it's not possible.
You
Oh,
have to
okay.
take a moment now.
What you can do now is just click on the link and it'll open up in your browser, and then you'll have the
okay.
information there.
Or you could drag it, whatever you like.
You can drag it onto the,
Talk to us, Tasha, what you got?
So Anna, are you trying to save the chat?
no, just like certain things
the
that they
links.
put up.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, what they said, you could just
Yeah.
click on it and open it up and open a
Because
new
that's the
tab.
only thing about saving the chat is that you actually can't access the links once you save the chat. It's wild. I'm like, yo, I can't click. All right.
Oh, I just cut and paste.
You see? Smart.
It says you could copy it, but I don't know where you copy it to, but that's,
Now I think you should just copy and paste it into another tab.
okay.
Please make sure you sign up. It's going to be so fun. Okay, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that.
Tosh is one of the organizers. She's on the low, but we just gave her a title.
She's mouthing words. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna agree with whatever she said.
Is assistant what is your title, Tosh?
Can we go back to the book club? Because that was not supposed to be happening. Let's bring Audrey back into the conversation. I'm gonna get you, Ron.
So, I wanted us to take a look at page. Sorry. Let's talk about her dad for a second. Let's go back to page 66, 67, basically chapter 9, right? The beginning. I think this is a femme-centered identity and a femme-centered book. Even as Audre explains that perhaps she doesn't always want to identify as femme, I think her understanding of herself and her body is shown in that way. And the parts about her father are deeply, deeply, deeply vulnerable parts, but they're almost kind of like zoomed over, right? So I wanted us to take a look. I'd love a reader. I would love a reader. Anyone want to volunteer to read this paragraph that I'm about to tell you to read?
I'll read it.
There we go.
Which paragraph? Pick a short one.
A short one. I want you to first.
This is like the shortest chapter.
Yeah, I want you to do where it starts from the word accept all the way to plant. But then I want you to go to that last paragraph on page 67, that mini one. And just so folks understand, in between, Audre is describing this process where her father is coming home from work to eat, right? And it's sort of like we see his routine through her lens as, you know, in this moment of time. But I'm gonna have Anna just read.
What do you want me to read?
Beginning.
The first paragraph?
I got you right now. I'm gonna have Anna just read the beginning, and then I'm gonna have her read the end. I want you to read the first 2 mini paragraphs, and then on page 67, the last one.
Okay. Except for political matters, my father was a man of few words, but he carried on extensive conversations with himself in the bathrooms every morning. During the last years of the war, my father could be found more often away from home than not, or at best, sleeping a few hours before going back out to his night job at the war plant.
And then on page 67, the last paragraph.
Sometimes no more than 2 or 3 sentences passed between us during the whole time we were together in the office. But I remember those evenings, particularly in the springtime, as very special and satisfying times.
Now, again, she in between is just, thank you, Anna. She's describing this process, sort of her father's, sort of how she sees him, right? In these moments that she has with him. But there's something really brief and concrete. And I wanted to know, did any of you, as you're reading this, feel like you wanted more around her father, or did you feel content with where she leaves us off?
I think I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, because
I don't think you are. I don't think you are.
But it's so intentional that this is the shortest chapter. And it's maybe her way of showing us that there's not much more to her father, and that this is it. This is the relationship that they had. And, you know, something that when I finished this chapter, I was thinking, like, what about these more interaction, like her watching him eat in his office or something, like, how was that or made it important? So I think about that. There was no words, like she would kiss him and then she would go on her way. And yeah, like I'm still thinking about that, and like how, you know, how these interactions, like, you know, says it was satisfying times. So I don't know what else in the future is gonna, like, what's gonna happen.
Thank you. I don't know why I didn't make this connection before, but hearing you say that, I felt like wow, it just hit me. I too grew up with a father that was not very consistent. And in the moments that I had with him that I remember in my childhood and my adolescence, they were very quiet times as well. Like literally now, as I hear you say this, that sort of fascination of just watching someone who, it's like an observation sort of how she describes him, and how she relishes this observation because it's sort of uninterrupted, right? Like her father's mood is not going to necessarily shift. She doesn't have to be on her toes or defensive. And I hear you say that, and I'm thinking, wow, I deeply relate to that feeling as a child. I used to watch my father do the most mundane things because I was just kind of like, I don't really see you, you know, and I want to take this in. So thank you for that.
And she does mention in the paragraph about, she talks about a specific time, but she does say in the last sentence, they form the fondest and closest memories I have of warm moments shared with my father. There were not many, she says there. So we see that her relationship with her father, it's not that she didn't like him, but they were distant. I think she felt a distance from that. And there may be various reasons for that. You know, believe it or not, I think that ethnic fathers in this country don't get a chance to show their family love. They're so busy trying to do other things that they felt was expected from them. So it's a combination, I think, of things, not that she's specifically saying that, but I'm trying to look at the full circumstance of what especially like a Black male father in the United States goes through. I wonder, you know, I'm trying to look at a lot of the psychology that
Yeah.
Audre has when she, as an author, because
Right.
I also feel there's a lot of symbolic things going on in here.
Absolutely. And I wonder though, RG, if that's taking it to a space where she actually doesn't name, because now we're centering that story of what the Black fatherhood is. I don't know if she's doing that. I think she's keeping it very much like, given the circumstances of Black fatherhood, this was mine. And I think it's important that we don't kind of move in that other way, because it allows us to navigate how she's experiencing it, as opposed to the psychological things that we know exist of Black fatherhood. Tasha, please, I see your hand up. I'm not used to the little things on the corner.
You know, because sometimes we are a spicy bunch, so sometimes we gotta just, you know, bring it back to some other things. I think she also takes opportunities to describe her father's character outside of her own personal relationship, right? And I think that's something that we got to look at too, when she talks about how her father went to her mom's job to pick up her laundry, to pick up her work clothes. And then that's when her supervisor recognized that she wasn't Spanish, but that she was Black. And then she got fired, right? So this was a husband, a partner that was helping her with her responsibilities when she wasn't well, right? So that speaks to his character. Another thing that she also offers is like, you know, her father had he had a mission to create a new kingdom in a new home, and that, to kind of piggyback over RG without going too far, is that there are some particular things that are expected from Black men in how they show up. So she references that by saying, like, I don't want to hear nothing about back where we used to be, because I gotta try to make this thing here for the family that we've created, right? And so in that, there aren't maybe those times for those tender moments, but the fact is that Audre's being intentional to say that when they did happen, they were relished. And I wanted to push back against distance, because I have friends that I don't see, nor do I talk to often, right? But that doesn't equate to the quality of the relationship that we've had. So I just want to offer that too. Time is not the indicator, time shared is not the indicator of the quality of the relationship. So those small, tender moments that she had with her father could have equated to the hours spent with her mom and be of equal significance, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So I just don't want
or stand out as much.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I don't want us to find ourselves bogged by time, because if we talk about it, there are some of us who've been in relationships because of time that we need to get the hell out a long time ago. You know what I'm saying?
Right. But I also want to, and I'm not challenging you, Tasha. I think that is literally where Audre wants us to be. But I want to name that, like, the relationship amongst friend and community, and then father to child, that sort of time is slower, fast. It's not even linear, you know, like, and you know, we all have that. Like, we all have parents, so we all understand the idea of, like, yeah, I may not talk to my friends for a while, but that's those choices, and that what that does in time is not the same as with that parental relationship. That either, you know, it either speeds it up or it slows it down. And I think,
also,
to Tasha's point, it's that regardless of time, or as we say in the hood, regardless of time, right? In spite of time, with lack of time or an abundance of time, these are the things that stand out about her father. And when we look at Audre's life through this femme lens, right, through this femme scope, I think it's important to name that, like, he exists in these little bouts of time, and that's okay. Because in her true life, whatever that looks like, yes, all of that could amount to 10, 12 years with her mother. That's on point. So I want to name that, you know, time differs in family, right? Time differs in community. And as someone who, I don't know if it's similar, but as someone who has a father who is not consistent, I won't say distant, but definitely not consistent, you experience time differently that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And
Yeah.
I hear you wholeheartedly. And to add that, I think the responsibilities of a parent differ than the responsibility of a friend, right? And so in knowing that you got to be out here in these streets so that I can eat, it might be okay for me not to see you for 3 hours, if that means food on the table. You know what I mean? So naming the nuances of the different relationships is obviously.
Or 3 days. Because as Ron has picked books, and he said he was gonna stop doing this. He has picked books where the author's fathers are very short in time, but significant. The fathers are very significant, even though they're not there all the time.
That seems beyond Ron's control, though. But
no,
let's
yes,
give him some credit. Like, I don't think he could.
So, but I do think
no, it
that
was his control.
In the other books, the fathers were really characters. This guy is a stand-up guy who is trying to, I mean, now that they're like in the middle, I think they're still in the war years. So he's building a business off of all this income that's coming into the Black community. I do want to make a point that, going back to my earlier statement about this being linear, it feels more so because Audre is not giving any attention, any substantive attention to her father's storyline or her sister's storyline. It's basically Audre and her mom, and that's it. And how the mom deals with society, and how Audre through, you know, school is dealing with society. The dad isn't giving much attention, nor the sisters might as well be like, I don't know, they feel like Charlie Brown characters. Wah, 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 wah. They're like, they don't even have like dialogue or anything. They just like, you know.
That's good, Ron. That was good.
Let's get deeper into the book. Let's get deeper into the book. But I think you're right, Ron. That's a great point. But we definitely gotta get deeper into the book before we know for sure.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to say that I don't know in what part of between the 14 chapters, she talks about a time where the sister couldn't go to this Washington, D.C. trip because they were Black. They couldn't stay in the same hotel. And then the parents, her father, her mom, took them down to D.C. I guess have that experience. And then the incident happened with the ice cream that they couldn't be served. But the thought of them taking their daughters there because they were denied of coming to this trip, that's what stood out for me for her father. And the fact that she said like these moments of the food, like that, I think that showed him, you know, caring for them in a distant way, I guess. But it was like very interesting, that part of like it wasn't highlighted in like in this chapter 9 and such, but that he took them over there.
Yeah. And that seems to start Audre down this path of realizing that, you know, the ice cream incident, that society is not equal, and she's going to dedicate herself to some kind of social justice from, you know, that point on, or at least, you know, it starts to shape her in that way of thinking.
Absolutely. Well, folks, we have 3 minutes left, and this has been, y'all know Tuesdays are the joy of my life, especially because I'm single. So I look forward to y'all. It's like a date every Tuesday. Y'all are like, girl, what? But it's true. And